This is the Streets and Sidewalks Committee. Today is March 9th, 2020. It's about quarter after 6 p.m. I need to change the clock over there. To my left is Councilman Jeffrey Schilling. To my right is Councilwoman Lynn Snee, and I'm Bob Phillips, the chair of this committee. We've got a couple of items on our agenda this evening, and could we silence cell phones, please? First item is going to be a project funding agreement with DP&L for the relocation of utility poles and wires along West Main Street. And Mr. Titterington or Mrs. Rhodes, are you going to lead the discussion off?
I think I'm leading the discussion.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
So a couple months ago, we meaning Christy and I came to council to discuss West Main Street, talking about DP&L. And talking about in advance of the West Main Street corridor project, working with DP&L to relocate their wires as a part of a CIP project for DP&L. So we're coming, we've after that meeting, it was kind of an indication, go back, continue to work with DP&L, see where we're at. And so we're kind of updating and hopefully finalizing and giving DP&L the nod to continue to move forward with this authorization from first council committee to push it then to council. So I'm asking for authorization for a project funding agreement with DP&L and then to relocate the poles and to rework their lines for a cost not to exceed $1 million. So as you know, phase one of the project meaning West Main Street corridor, is from Cherry Street to Ridge. And then phase two, and that would begin construction in 2022. Phase two of the project is from Ridge out to 75, and that's in construction 2023. So it goes anywhere from widening the streets, we're putting curbs back in, tree lawn, sidewalks, upgrading stormwater storm sewers that are deficient, a couple of point repairs with sewer, a couple of point repairs with West Main. So that's just the project. But in advance of that, we've been coordinating with DP&L for a capital improvement project for them to serve some of the Troy neighborhoods, switching them from the 4 kV to 12 kV. I'm not an electrician. I don't know what that does, but that's kind of where their direction, electrical direction, is. That's what they've been doing. That's a goal of theirs. And so as part of this project, they've kind of identified this as, hey, we could move their projects forward in conjunction with ours. So we have been working with them about really the lines are overhead from the CSX Railroad, which is the edge of our phase one, all the way out to 75. So we've kind of identified and working with them that from the CSX Railroad to Weston. So Weston is McDonald's-ish area. To get the lines, overhead pole line relocated off of West Main, there will still be buried DP&L lines along West Main, but it'll be buried and you won't see it as much. So attached, you'll see an aerial diagram that I kind of attempted to kind of show you what we're talking about and where overhead exists, where new primary would be placed, where buried underground would be placed as a part of that project. So we can reference that. You guys can ask questions once we get a little bit further. So some of the, and so in working with DP&L, it's about what's the least intrusive path, because we're just trying to pick a path. What's the least intrusive path? Location of the proposed utility pole is in the right-of-way and through Joe Reardon Skate Park. So, from whether it be in the right-of-way, but then from Ridge to the CSX Railroad, we're talking about, and we've gone to Park Board to talk to them to running it through Joe Reardon Skate Park, and Jeremy's here tonight. We're talking, again, least intrusive path. Where are we going to lose the least amount of trees? What trees aren't good anyways? Kind of working through that with the park department so that we could give them an easement there. And then, let's see, new route includes to be running along the east side of Ridge Avenue between West Main and McCaig. So I just there's a whole bunch of stuff there. So streetlight poles that exist along Ridge, they're already there right now, but we're talking about if we replace this with an overhead electric line, we would be taking down the streetlight poles. They'd be a part of these poles that are going up along Ridge. So we'd be consolidating. We wouldn't be doubling the amount of poles. We'd be consolidating wherever there's a streetlight pole. We'd probably do need a little bit more number of poles along Ridge, but it wouldn't be doubling those number of poles. Let's see. Park Board, I've made that comment. DP&L relocation will leave West Main Street corridor with buried utilities and transformer or service boxes. So you guys kind of like, well, what's that look like? So I've provided a picture down below to kind of give you an indication as to the green box in that picture is the transformer is a DP&L. All the other silver or the green box back behind, those are pedestals from communications, fiber optic companies. So we anticipate those. We wanted to continue our coordination with DP&L, finalize it hopefully with council. Our next step is to go back to the utility companies to talk about where they're going to put their infrastructure, hopefully getting them in a duct bank along West Main Street, and figure out where those pedestals for them are going to be and what they need. So the DP&L's relocation project will generally remove the utility pole line, but there will be a couple of crossings still overhead, one of them specifically being Norwich. We know that Norwich and that bridge is a pinch point, and there's not a lot of freeboard above the bridge to put utilities, buried utilities, and to go under it is 15, 20-foot bore underneath, and they hit rock. We've had utility companies attempting to go underneath, and we just come into situations. So DP&L said, can we go overhead, not necessarily parallel to Main, but across Main from Little Caesars parking lot to the north to North Norwich. And we said, yeah, we can accommodate and work with you there, because it's kind of, we get to the point where if they can't go underground, where can they go, and how can we accommodate and assist with that? And so we said, yes, we can work with you with that. Then there are a couple of properties that will, they have 3-phase being fed to them right now, and so we need to refeed some of those, DP&L needs to refeed some of those properties. So it'd be Chase Bank, Lafayette, and Tire Choice. So we'll be assisting DP&L to secure easements and assist with that refeeding. We're familiar with the properties around here and with the property owners, and so we said DP&L that we would assist with those. So as a net cost, DP&L's relocation project is $1 million, which includes the DP&L discount when we mean about relocating. So if they were just going to relocate the utility poles still along West Main, they've taken that out of that $1 million number. And so that is the net of it running along West Main in order to allow for the planning and the design and the relocation project to continue. So they will be bidding it, DP&L. So what this does, we give the authorization for $1 million. We're not writing a check for $1 million tomorrow. DP&L is going to be going out. They're going to be finalizing their design. They're going to be going out to bid with their contractors, and then we would be paying the cost difference between whatever the cost of their contractors is to so they will be bidding both things, like the relocation. If they were just going to relocate along West Main, DP&L is going to have their contractor bid that, as well as this rerouting relocation off of West Main. So as long as I've totally confused all of you guys, at this point, we're talking about a project funding agreement with DP&L. So I'm going to open it up to questions at this point.
So with their conversion from 4 kV to 12 kV, which is a lot of electricity, they're going to upgrade this whole grid that you have in the blue, purple, or lavender and gold colors. They're going to upgrade that all to 12 kV?
Some of that is already, no. So a couple of the one location that was identified, which is the Westbrook area. So north of West Main, the Westbrook area. And they're not doing it, this is setting them up to do that. But we were talking specific, so I'm not sure how quickly they'll proceed with that, but this really sets them up to do that. And then the other area is the Westgate Penn Road I don't know what that subdivision's called, but between kind of all the way down to McCaig, kind of that Haywood next to, across the road, across Ridge Avenue, the Haywood. Those were just two neighborhoods that were identified that, as a part of this project and them doing these upgrades, they'd be able to switch those over from 4 kV to 12 kV.
And I'm looking at it, and I'm seeing potentially 3 overhead crossings, overhead wires on Main Street. The one on Ridge,
Yes.
the one north of
That's Norwich.
Norwich, is that what it is? And then the one closer to the Mayor's Park.
Yes, so Weston, that's where, so at Weston, it will come over
Weston,
Main
right.
Street and it'll begin to stay along West Main then. If you probably can't visualize it, but at Weston, right after Weston, there's a park there. Not the Mayor's Park, before the Mayor's Park. Okay, it's just a green space. It's kind of a triangle. It's like Weston and Croydon? Covent? Weston and Covent and Main Street, and there's a little triangle piece there. And as you drive out there, if you just look there, you'll see a big H that looks like it's got 3 huge transformers. Those are all DP&L. And so they kind of said that's as far as we can go because that's some kind of major infrastructure for them.
And that's on the north side of the roadway, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes, and so from there on, they will be along West Main and be heading out, I think they even go over Interstate 75 and then they stay along West Main.
And they were fairly confident then that we were not going to be looking over that $1 million figure.
Correct,
Yeah, and if they do, then we
Yeah.
come back and get
Right.
yep,
the not to exceed increased.
Got it, thank you. That's
Yeah.
all I have. Either one of you?
Yes.
Two folks, Mr. Schilling?
Yes, on the map, I'm looking, you have the gold line, which is Ridge,
Yeah.
or the yellow, and then the bottom blue line is McCaig. So they're going to be burying the lines along McCaig, or have they already done that?
so all the blue is all aerial and it already exists.
Okay.
So
Okay.
the blue that you see, there's already an existing line there. So everything that runs, the big green area in the middle is the Hobart Urban Nature Preserve.
Right, right.
Okay, so the blue line that runs on the west side of that or on the left side of that already exists there. Then it goes down to McCaig and there's already lines along McCaig existing.
So we're not going to revisit McCaig, having just repaired that
Correct.
a couple of years ago.
Yep.
Okay.
So the proposed is the new line up Ridge.
Okay.
And then you can see the proposed, like, over by Weston. Now, I guess I may have showed, there's an arrow that says reconductor an existing pole line. And so there is an existing line there, but they're going to pull new line. So I guess I kind of showed that a little bit off, that there is already an existing pole line. We're not putting a new pole line, but we would be putting it partially down Weston.
And there's no grants or anything that we can get to help us with this?
No, so just a reminder, if we talk about the West Main Street project, we have obtained, so as part of West Main Street project, not a part of this, but as a part of the West Main Street project, we've obtained over $6 million in funding. So we anticipate that half of the capital project of West Main Street will be by grant fundings. But no, for this work through DP&L and the time frame that it needs to occur, there is no grant money.
So the rebuilding of West Main Street, the number right now is $12 million, and we're adding another $1 million onto this for the redo or is the $1 million we're talking about in the $12 million that
There's not.
No.
so we're really talking now $13 million?
Yep.
Okay.
And I say 6 million because it's 2.5 in phase 1, very close to 3 million in phase 2, and I believe just shy of $1 million for resurfacing, which is split between phase 1 and phase 2, and that's a different pot that we've been working with for ODOT,
Okay.
and that was grant monies.
Mr. Phillips. Just a couple of questions. When we talked about this before, we
Yes.
were talking about the electrical lines that ran along the poles and then the
All the
lower lines,
attachers.
the attachers on that. So when these make the crossing at the 3 places over Main Street, will they include those attachers, or will they just be electrical lines crossing?
They probably, we're anticipating that some of them may include attachers, but we don't know yet. That's why we were trying to get to this point with DP&L to understand and then begin to work with the attachers. There's so many of them, and not really knowing the way that council wanted to proceed, we kind of have to get this nod before we can go and start coordinating, because to date, it's been pretty difficult, but I think Patrick may have something to add. Oh, okay. So we don't know at this point, but we've also been talking to DP&L, and they were talking about Ridge, and they said, well, on the north side of Ridge, they said, with the attachers, because the attachers will be running underground in the city's duck bank. And so they said in order for the attachers to come up, they'll have to run up some poles. And so right now, per DP&L's numbers, they have anywhere from 3 to 7 attachers. And so it'll just depend on how long's that attacher, where's he come into the system, where's he come out, and then they run up poles to then get overhead. So it may end up all being kind of on the north side of Ridge, that maybe they don't run completely across Ridge. Norwich, I think there's a couple of attachers that cross Norwich right now. I don't see that is a main route for attachers to cross, so I don't envision that line overhead changes very much. Now, Weston, that would be a logical place that the attachers would follow the route, and they would, cross on Weston, I think, because then they're all along West Main, so they would just continue out on West Main.
Okay. And one other question, I believe you mentioned last time that the transformer or service boxes that are at the property line.
Yep.
There is one box for each 2 residents?
That is the way that is the way I understand it, because this is similar, like this is from a newer subdivision, that picture.
Sure.
And so, it would be 1 per 2, yes.
Okay, and those would be on both sides?
Well, so that's what, could be on the north side and the south side, correct. Now, some of the properties along West Main are served from the rear already. Like the, let's see, I want to say the 1200 block. So west of Minky Park, some of those properties are already served from the rear, and so they'll continue to be served from the rear. So you won't see the boxes necessarily in front, the transformer boxes, the green transformer, but you may still see the pedestals, the silver ones that are smaller and about 18, 20 inches tall.
And like in the picture, is the street light pole always associated with that box to provide?
Well, it generally is, but we will, it generally is in subdivisions, because Miami Valley Lighting, being the lighting provider, they want to run the smallest amount of conduit, and they know that their electric's there at the transformer. I don't know that that's going to be the case. What we've asked Miami Valley Lighting initially with respects to West Main is let's review the lighting along West Main and what's an acceptable level. So I can't say that similar to there's not going to be a green box every other property. Also, in our duct bank, we want to have Miami Valley Lighting have a line in there. So hopefully then that frees them up and that it's not all clustered together.
All right. Thank you. That was all I had.
Any other questions, any other council members?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, Ms. Rose.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, thank you. So we're still going to bury underground lines going along Main Street.
Yes.
Why can't we just do it all there? How come we can't put the whole, 12 kilovolts or what, all the way
Not
down?
enough ground, not enough space. They would be in the middle of our street, and they don't want to be in the middle of our street, and we don't necessarily want them to be in the middle of the street, because anytime they'd have to work on it or maintain it, they'd have to go down there. The second reason is DP&L doesn't. They want to keep as little buried as possible, because they talk about downtimes and being able to find the outage, and they can't see it if it's buried. And so this is really the first place that DP&L's doing this, buried along West Main Street. And then also this the reroute, when we talk about the 4 to 12 and the reroute around along McKeag, they have existing 3-phase there already. And so again, I'm not an electrician or electrical person, but the three-phase, that can carry what they need. And so a lot of the lines that you see along West Main Street right now, there's all the attachers, and then above, there's like 3 or 4 different rows of electrical lines. Those are all just, if you want to say bypass, they're just trying to get to their location. Their location is not West Main between our project. It may be downtown. It may be another neighborhood. And so this reroute is just allowing them to continue that feed. And a lot of it being already on existing lines that they already have. And so they're really consolidating their lines as well.
Okay.
Okay.
And you mentioned, because they're going to have to go into neighborhoods with these, and you said that, at least on Ridge, they're going to use existing poles. So the trees there should not be affected. But on some of the other areas that they're
Pole
going into-
locations, they won't be using existing poles. Right now, the existing poles are only holding up street lights. So we're going to try and get them to use existing pole locations, but there's going to be an overhead line that there may or may not be there right now. So the trees will be affected along Ridge, the east side of Ridge, some of them.
And then they'll go in and trim those trees?
Either that or take them out,
Yeah.
depending on if they're obstructions.
Okay. And then the last question, I see where McKeag and Ridge come together right there. There was talk, or has been talk, of changing that intersection so it flows better. Is that taken into account so we don't have to do this again if or should, and if that happens?
Well, a road similar to, like we're talking about the crossing of West Main Street, a line can go over the street. So even if that does become relocated in the future, and it's right now not in our 5-year plan, but even if Ridge would become relocated in the future, I don't think it would be a huge change. So we're keeping it in our mind, but I don't think it would be a huge change from how the electric is placed, the poles or anything like that. A couple poles may be moved, but if we proceed with that in the 5-10 year plan, I don't think it'll be a huge thing.
Just keep in mind that in that area you're talking about, that's all overhead.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of moving poles, it's not a matter of digging up
Okay.
and moving it.
And then DP&L also talks about bearing versus overhead, and they talk about capacity. So it's easier for them and their electrical expertise to add a line overhead versus to have to find a line buried, to add a line buried in the ground.
Okay. Can we find out, we just had a major wind event go through here and took out a bunch of trees. And it's happened quite a bit over the past 10 years. Can we kind of get a small inventory of how many trees will be affected?
Yeah.
Ridge is a pretty tree-lined street, and, it's real nice.
Yeah.
You get around the Hobart Nature Preserve, and that's kind of a nice tree-lined area also.
Yeah, so nothing new. Right now, Hobart Urban Nature Preserve, there's an existing line there. And so they're not proposing to do anything new along that existing line.
Okay.
Yeah, we're talking about on the east side of Ridge, where there are going to be less trees. Not
Okay.
the west side.
They'd be like tree lawn trees. So if they're getting too big, they're probably affecting the sidewalk or the street.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other council people have any questions? Anybody in the audience have any questions? Okay, seeing none, what is your feeling on this? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Titterington had.
Well, you might want to know how we're going to fund this.
Oh, sorry.
Minor issue.
Well,
So,
we touched on that, but
Yeah.
little
not
bit.
today, but previously.
You asked about grants. It's not really a grant, but as Jill mentioned earlier, there's a significant reduction in the gross cost to the city because of going from 4K to 12K in the range of $350,000 to $400,000. That's what allowed us to feel reasonably confident with the $1 million number. In terms of funding this, this would be advance funded because we know ultimately we're going to go out for bond financing on the whole project. So later in the year, maybe early next year, depending on the timing of when DP&L comes back with their bids, is when you may see a reappropriation. It would be under general fund reserves, which would then be refunded by bond proceeds in the future. And I worked that out, discussed that with Mr. Frigge, and he's in agreement with that approach, which we've used in the past.
Does this project, with DPL doing the work, are they subject to prevailing wage? But we had that problem when we redid some things all around Tim Hortons many years ago. We had done the project, or we had a contractor do the project, and then they came back and we had to go back and pay prevailing wage on top of the contract that we.
Yeah, that was a city infrastructure project, I believe. I wasn't
Yeah,
sure, but I
yeah.
believe it was involved a street relocation, and that's where prevailing wage kicked in.
Came in, but the contractor would, essentially, we tried to get it, we first paid, it was first paid with, whatever the wage they were paying, but then they had to go back and pay more because it fell into the prevailing wage because the city somehow was involved in the process. And so this is my question again, because we are, even though this is DP&L's deal, the city's involved in some way, and so is this going to kick into prevailing wage going sometime in the future, come back and bite us
Yeah,
again?
we can double check that, but since this is a DP&L bid project, and this is work that DP&L is doing, at least in part for their own upgrade, not sure that prevailing wage applies.
Okay, yeah, it'd be interesting to check it. Yes, Jill?
And I'm pretty sure that DP&L follows a competitive bid process. And so that's part of, I'm not specific, I'm not 100% sure about prevailing wage. I will talk to them and ask them, but I know that they follow a competitive bid process.
Yeah, I think the thing on Tim Hortons, I think Tim Hortons had to redo some things in the street or something, but then it came back that the city was involved.
Well, I believe it was our project.
Was it our project? But anyway, we ended up having to pay we paid everybody, and then we had to go back and pay prevailing wage. We had to write another check to cover the prevailing wage cost above and beyond what it's been a while, but memory isn't always as good as it used to be. But anyway, if we can check on that, just make sure that we're clear on that, clear of that, I guess.
Okay, seeing nothing further, no other questions, how the
Move
committee
forward.
members? All right, it's unanimous with the committee to move ahead as staff has recommended and
Yes.
council.
I did have one more thing. Well, since you are going to make a recommendation to council, as part of this project, Jill talked about the easements at Joe Reardon Park. Just to clarify, those poles would be at the south edge of the park, so it would not block, it would not impede the skate park operations. We would like to also, as part of your recommendation, include an authorization for the park board to grant those easements. That was not in the initial recommendation, but in an effort to, we're trying to streamline the easement process, especially where we accept them. You probably noticed that we've had about a gajillion. Is that too big a number? Gajillion easement acceptances in the last several weeks. So council needs to authorize the park board to execute those easements, and so we're just asking you to include that as in your recommendation.
Okay, the only thing I see in the original report is with coordination with the park board for the route through the park.
Correct.
Okay. So that's not an addition.
And the park board is recommending the easements, and that's what Jill was talking about. We went to the park board last week and got their okay.
Okay.
But the legislation has to come from the council.
Okay. Do you both understand that?
Yep.
I don't have any problem with that.
Any change with your opinion or
No.
recommendation?
No.
Okay, it is still unanimous with the committee to move forward as the staff report indicates, and with that addition. Appreciate it. And the next item, come before streets and sidewalks. Any other
Write
items?
that down.
Yeah, there is.
Just a second.
So, Reserve at Washington, I believe, I don't know.
No, choice
No.
one,
Choice one in Riverside.
Riverside.
Oh, it's Choice 1 Riverside. Oh, Choice 1 Riverside. Riverside 3 and 4. The city staff went out for design RFPs, and we got 2 proposals back. And one of them, Choice 1 was the best and most responsive when we reviewed them. And so we're asking council to authorize the design for Riverside Drive reconstruction project phase 3 and phase 4 at a cost not to exceed $275,000, which, so this will be the reconstruction from Orchard Drive up to the end of Duke Park. And it came in under budget. It came in under budget. Sorry.
And I don't have any questions. Any questions?
I do not.
Can you acknowledge the?
I'm sorry?
Can you acknowledge the fact that?
We did notice that it came in under budget.
Thank you, Miss Nee.
Any other questions from any of the other council folks? Any other questions from anybody in the audience at large? Pleasure with this one.
Move forward.
Go ahead.
It is unanimous with the committee that this move forward as staff is recommending under budget. Any other items come before the Streets and Sidewalks Committee?
No,